There's no class scheduled for Friday. I sort of got the schedule laid out for the rest of the course on C-Base. There's been a lot of flipping and flopping. Most noticeably, Dr. Kusin, who has a session on dental anesthesia, which is usually the week before the final exam. He's out of town that week, so we moved that back to a little bit earlier. He also has a session where he shows you all the machines or equipment or pliers or whatever for removing teeth, and then you get to spend a couple of hours removing the teeth of the cadavers if you're so inclined. That will be the day after the final exam. That will be on the 22nd. And the good part about that is that not only will your cadavers be available, but the medical students will be done with their 35 bodies or however many they have. So there'll be a lot to work with. So that's not on C-Base yet, but that will be there. Okay, what else? Okay, so the other issue is when I said that next Monday I was going to do a pro section on the lower limb, there was a lot of whining and moaning.
We're the biggest ones.
I noticed that. If this is too much of an inconvenience for you, I can try to fit it into the last part of the course before the last exam. I'm going to do it sometime between now and the exam. I can do it either next Monday, and then if I move this towards the end of the course, I have to grab something from the latter part and to do Monday, just so the days work out. What I would probably grab was a lecture on lymphatics or something that doesn't involve a lab. But if you're feeling unduly stressed by having both upper and lower limb in this module, let me know in the next 48 hours or so before I start skinning legs.
We'll tell you now.
Well, I think
we know.
yes, does everyone elect Mackenzie as your designated spokesperson? I know what you're going to say. Shut the course down now. And pick up on what I don't understand is why the other course is more important than anatomy, but we'll worry about that later. Okay. Yes?
Wait, no, that's not how we feel. It's just like for us, it's not on our boards, so we just don't want
anatomy?
No, the lower limb.
Well, I was told that it's creeping in here and there.
Is there like a way where we can just like learn about it? Because I'm sure we're all interested, but not be tested on it. Yeah,
I bet you will. Everybody's going to study without it being on the exam. Raise your hand and swear. Sign your name in blood. No. Yes, sir.
What if you just lecture about it next week, but then it's not on, like, included like the last exam?
What?
Like, you can lecture about it like next week, but then like it won't be included on this exam, but the final exam.
That's fine. Okay, we'll do that. There was something else, but I don't remember. Oh, okay. So there's no class this Friday. On the books, there is no class next Friday, which is like the 28th. However, if people would like and will agree to show up in some volume, none of us will be available that Friday, sadly as it seems. But Dr. Heritage, Mr. Heritage will be here, and I can arrange for you to have a practice pinning on that day if you would like. But I'm not going to line up a bunch of people to do a practice pinning and have them sit there at 1 or 2 o'clock on Friday afternoon with no one showing up. So if people think you have another exam, I think, or something on that Friday morning. It's always But if people will show up in the afternoon, either 1 or 2 o'clock, I will arrange to have a pinning and informal review session. Would people show up if that happened? Raise your hand. Raise both hands. Okay. I just don't want to get a bunch of people to put together an exam and have one person wander in. It's sort of a waste of person time. Okay. So the resolution, as I understand it, is Colin.
This is kind of about something we said previously about tracking the teeth the day after the final exam.
Yes.
On the Tuesday of Thanksgiving week. Is that mandatory?
I have no idea. I doubt it's after the exam. So.
Okay.
But I'm sure you can study for it anyway.
Well, no, I just, because I already have Thanksgiving travel plans.
Yeah, no, I suspect that's the case. Unfortunately, it just can't be done any other day because the bodies are being used for other purposes. No, I think it's just sort of a fun game, extra credit, whatever. That's what Dr. Toussaint has done in previous years. I'm sure you'll get further experience in such things over the next couple of years. Okay, so I will put together a lecture and pro section on the lower limb, or maybe a lecture on the lower limb. Well, we can do the pro section later. If you're not going to be tested on the pro section this time, we can do the pro section later. There'll be something on the lower limb next Monday.
So we do have class Monday?
What?
We do have class next
You
Monday.
do have class
but
next
not
Monday.
Tuesday.
But not Tuesday. I mean, I can flip it one way or the other.
I just didn't know because I thought it said on CBA's Tuesday.
I haven't looked at it.
There's nothing like on here, so I didn't know.
Is there a preference of Monday or Tuesday? It's all the same to me. I mean, they're both holidays, so it's sort of six of one, half dozen of the other, I suspect. Okay, so instead of Monday. Okay, and then next Wednesday is a review day. So it'll be all there, but there'll be no new material. So you go in at 1 and we'll wander around, help you, and then Friday, the 28th, there will be a pinning, practice pinning, so you can sort of, check, see if you know all those structures you've been dissecting for the past few years. Okie dokie. Now, I have the pleasure of offering you Dr. Fernandez, who's going to talk about orbits and eyeballs.
All right. I have one question for you, Dr. Flegel. You asked me to come in Saturday after that practice.
Yeah. In addition. Of course, it never ends, or at least never has a solid schedule. So in addition to the practice pinning on Friday, the 28th, Dr. Fernandez has generously offered to come in on Saturday afternoon to either go over material verbally or go over dissections. Again, would anybody be interested in taking him up on that? I don't want him to come in watching a football game or something to sit in an empty lab. You're on.
All right. All right, so today we're going to talk about the orbit. Although I really won't be talking about the eye much at all or how we perceive the world. Really just going to be talking about where the eyeball sits, so the orbit and the surrounding muscles and nerves, etc. So here's the outline for today. We're going to start with a review of the bony orbit and then talk about the eyelids and the lacrimal apparatus, i.e. The tear drainage system, and then arteries and veins, nerves, some of which we're familiar with, and then a group of muscles which are called the extraocular muscles, so the muscles that move the eyeball around, and then we're going to study the intrinsic muscles of the eye later on, and then finally just some spatial relationships in the superior orbital frame and the fissure and the optic canal. Okay, so we start with the bones of the orbit, which I'm sure you're all very familiar with. So the orbit is constructed by contributions from the frontal bone in blue, the zygomatic bone down here, maxilla, both of the wings of the sphenoid bone, so the greater wing of the sphenoid, the lesser wing up here, which have spaces through them, of course. Medially, you have the orbital plate of the ethmoid and the orbital process of the palatine bone, as well as the lacrimal bone right here. And so there's spaces between these bones, of course. So a big one here, this nasolacrimal canal, which we'll talk about a little bit more in a bit, is sort of bracketed between these two anterior and posterior lacrimal crests. There's a fossa here that the lacrimal sac sits in life. Posteriorly in the orbit, you can see these little foramina, these posterior and anterior ethmoidal foramina, and today in dissection you should be able to see some nerves and arteries going through those. We have the optic canal right here, the superior orbital fissure, of course, and the inferior orbital fissure with a groove and canal going through that for passage of the infraorbital neurovasculature, which we've already seen. Sort of situated superolaterally in the orbit is always the lacrimal gland, which is sort of highlighted here in red, so that's a good way to orient yourself in the orbit, is that the lacrimal gland producing the tears is always in the superolateral corner. Okay, so here is an eyeball, and you can see some structures. You can see the white of the eye is what's called the sclera, and there's a membrane overlying that called the bulbar conjunctiva, which I'll talk about more in a bit. The corners of the eyes are called the canthus, so the medial and lateral canthus. So you see here on the medial canthus or angle of the eye, you can see a little pool, what's called the lacrimal lake, and tears well up in there, and then they drain into this what's called carbuncle here, this little bump. You can see, of course, the pupil and the iris in the center here, the iris, the colored part. And here is a cross-section, a cartoon of a cross-section of the orbit. And you can see, so superiorly, we're familiar with the sort of the anterior cranial fossa right here, the frontal sinus we've seen. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to break through sort of the floor of the anterior cranial fossa. And the first thing you're going to run into is this layer of periosteum that's called periorbita, this sort of fibrous stuff right here. And then there's going to be a variable amount of fat before you get down into some of these extraocular muscles and other structures in the orbit. You can see sort of anterior to the eyeball, you have this palpebral fissure, this space between the two eyelids. This is what an eyelid looks like in cross-section. And there's a bunch of structures in here. We'll take a closer look. So we magnify this. We can see sort of the tendon of the levator palpebrae superioris, which is a muscle that...
Can you look behind the podium so you're walking the slide?
My bad. Okay. So here, now that you can see it, is the tendon of the levator palpebrae superioris. Keeps the eyelid elevated, along with this muscle right here, the smooth muscle, the superior tarsal muscle, which receives sympathetic innervation from the superior cervical ganglion. We have this muscle we've learned about already, the palpebral part of orbicularis oculi, a muscle of facial expression, and then you have sort of the skeleton of the eyelids, which are called the tarsal plates. So we see a superior tarsal plate here with some of these, I don't even know how to say that word. Does anyone know? Mebo? I don't know. It's sebaceous glands, specialized sebaceous glands, these oil-producing glands. And then we have more conjunctiva here, this layer. So I said there was a layer of conjunctiva on the eyeball. So too is there one on the sort of lining of the eyelids. And then you have the eyelashes hanging out here. Okay. Back to the conjunctiva. So it's a transparent membrane which lubricates the eye. It prevents infection. It itself is not immune to infection, so the conjunctiva can get infected, and that's what you call pink eye. Okay, and you can see down here the palpebral part of the conjunctiva lining the eyelid, and then there's the conjunctival fornix. Fornix is a Latin word that means arch, so it's this little arched part right here, and then it reflects onto the eyeball itself, anterior to the sclera, which is this pink stuff right here. So just in front of that, you have the bulbar conjunctiva. Okay. So here is the eye with the eyelids dissected away, so you can see more of the structure of the eyelids. You can see these superior and inferior tarsal plates, which help give the eyelids their shape. You can see the palpebral ligaments that sort of anchor the eyelids mediolaterally here. And again, you can see that tendon, that broad tendon of the levator palpebrae superioris coming in on the upper eyelid right there. So here's a view, another view of the conjunctiva. So here you see it on the sclera itself, the bulbar conjunctiva covering the sclera, and then there's that